Hey everyone, it's MK. Welcome back. So it's been a while since I did a YouTube video. I apologize about that, but if you've been following me, you know I've been really busy moving into my new studio. But I'm on vacation right now. It's the week between Christmas and New Year's, and I've been watching some of the boards, and there's been some chatter and some questions about repositioning and restarting with your Prostitcher. Once maybe you have to stop for the day or wind a bobbin or something happens in the middle of a pass. So this video is going to cover two examples of how to get yourself started in Prostitcher, and we're going to focus on start and end points. All right, so I'm going to meet you inside a simulation and then I'll be right back here. Hey everyone, it's MK. Welcome back. So I thought today I would do a very short video on repositioning and restarting. There seems to be an awful lot of chatter on the boards about people losing their spot or having things happen when you're in the middle of a pass or a middle of the pattern, and making sure that you can get yourself restarted where you left off. So let's just begin. What you're looking at the screen right now is just a simple line drawing of a little table runner. So you pretend that you have this table runner loaded and we're ready to stitch. All right, I've just created a pantograph here, a few passes of a pantograph, just enough to cover this table runner. I'm not going to go through the steps for setup on pantograph. I have a few steps that I take in my studio to make my pantographs go quicker. If you're interested in that, you can give me a shout about taking one of my classes or perhaps purchasing my best practices for a pantograph session. But what we want to pretend today is that you're going to pretend that we're working on a very large, maybe a king-size quilt. I'm using this small table runner just so that we can see things easier on the screen. Now, one thing that I try to do in my studio, especially when I'm working on a pantograph, is try to finish out a pass when I'm ready to stop for the evening. I find that it's just easier to get myself to a start point at the end of the day, mark that start point for the next day. When I come back, it's very easy to find, start on the next pass and go. But that's not always the case, is it? Maybe something happens in the middle of our stitching. Maybe we accidentally get ourselves out of position, or maybe we run out of thread, or, just whatever happens, and we want to be able to get ourselves back to a spot where we left off. We want to make sure we're positioned correctly, and we want to continue on. So in this first example, let's pretend that this is a king-size quilt. We're in the middle of a pass. We're really tired. We're going to go to bed for the night, and we want to just stop in the middle of a pass, but we want to be able to pick up tomorrow where we left off. So I'm just going to start this stitching, and let's just pretend that right about here is where we want to finish for the night. Now, if at all possible, I'm going to try to pause my machine in a point or in some sort of a change of direction. Sometimes it's not exactly possible to stop your Prostitcher exactly where you want it. You hit pause and it keeps going a little bit, or you're not exactly able to get it into a change of direction. But I'm going to try to pause it here as it's coming up to that change of direction. All right, I just about hit it. Not quite, but it's close. All right, one thing that I want to show you, I'm going to hit emergency stop, okay? I'm just going to stop the pattern. Now, I want to go up here under the quilt menu, so it's over here on the left, and I want you to look at this status button right here. When I push the status button, there's going to be some numbers that appear in this area of the screen. So I'm going to hit status, and what appears here is your segment counter. That little segment counter can be very, very useful to you. It tells you exactly where you are in a pattern as you're stitching. All right, so we hit pause, and right here was where my needle was when I hit pause. Okay, now I want to find out what that segment counter number is right there. So I'm just going to go under quilt, new start point. I'm going to do a start auto on and a start auto off. That's kind of the key with using the start auto button down here, is it helps you fine tune where you're at, but just make sure to turn it off. Okay, so if we look down here on the bottom of the screen, this segment number right here, 33,300, matches exactly the segment number up here. That's exactly where we want to start tomorrow because we're going to bed, right? So we want to write that number down on a piece of paper, Or sometimes what I do is I just snap a picture of it with my cell phone so that I know that I have it the next day. Okay, so we're writing that number down, 33,300. Now we've stopped the pattern. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a needle down using my handlebars, and I'm just going to put my needle down into my quilt right there, and then I'm going to shut down my system. Okay, so let's just pretend we're doing that for the night. I'm just going to exit to Windows. You would do your shutdown. You're going to bed, and then we'll come back tomorrow. Okay, so let's just pretend. Forward. You've gone to bed, you've got up the next day, you're feeling pretty good. You're going to finish out this pass right exactly where you left off yesterday. All right, so what you're looking down at is the part of the pattern that you've already stitched. And what's open down here on the screen is the design that you were working on yesterday. Okay, when you open up the design, however, it's not going to be properly positioned, correct? Because you've closed down your machine. So you've completely lost the positioning for this pattern. Okay, but you know that you wrote down that number at the end of the day yesterday. So let's go into quilt. Our pattern is open. Let's go into quilt. Let's go into new, start, and end. And let's go down here to the segment counter. Well, we know that we want that to be 33,300. That's where we want to start. And if you see, your start circle moved down to that point in the pattern. Your machine is already in position because that's exactly where you left it last night, right? And your needle is down. Now, just a side note about that. When you come to your machine the next day and you fire it up, it may just click on you a little bit, or it may just not settle into that position because overnight your motors have been unengaged. Now when you turn your Prostitcher on, it's going to try to re-engage, right? What you might want to do is come up here to the right-hand side. Make sure your motors are unengaged. Just grab your handlebars and just give that a little bit of a shake. Not a big shake, just a little bit of a movement so that it can settle right back into your track and right back into your pattern right where you left it the night before. Okay? So we're ready to go. We've done our quilt new start point. We've made the new start point 33,300. That's right where we left off last night. Well, we want to place that number right where our crosshairs are. That's easy to do. We all know how to do that. Let's go under Design. Let's do Reposition, and we're going to reposition it based on that start point that we just created. So we're going to do Start Point, and that's going to snap the pattern exactly where you were the night before. All of this up here is already stitched out. You kind of have to use your imagination, right? Because I'm doing this instruction from simulation. So this portion has already been stitched out. This is now where we're at because we told the Prostitcher that's where we want to start. Great. We're probably going to want to lift our needle. I like to do that manually. Your Prostitcher is going to lift the needle out of your quilt and start stitching. I like to do that manually. So I'm going to lift my needle up. I'm going to check my stitch settings. I like to, at the beginning of every new day, I like to turn my status counter on. Once it's on, it's going to stay on. I'm going to go under Stitch and I'm going to check my settings. I don't need a pull up this time because I'm still engaged with the top thread and the bottom thread. I don't want to tie off right there. I just want to continue stitching. All I have to do is hit Run and my Prostitcher is going to pick up right exactly where I left off. Isn't that a beautiful thing? So really get into the habit, ladies and gentlemen, of turning on your segment counter. It is a huge, huge help to you to know where you are in a pattern, be able to get yourself back to that exact same spot, reposition on that exact same spot, and keep going. I want to talk us through how we're going to find our spot if we do that dreaded thing that we've all done. Let's say we're stitching along on this second pass of this pattern and we run out of bobbin thread or something happens right there and we hit pause. Okay, so what you're looking at right now is I've hit pause. But if you look up here on the right hand side, my motors are still engaged, right? Let's say that I forgot about that. And in this example, let's also say that I forgot to turn on my segment counter at the beginning of the day. So I grab my handlebars, I go to move my machine out of the way, but I forgot that my motors are engaged. I give it a good tug. All of a sudden, we hear that dreaded noise that we hear when we know we've drug our machine with our motor engaged over the blue track. And now what has happened? We know we're completely out of position. Okay, what I usually do at that point is I just hit emergency stop. Okay, because I already know I'm out of position. Well, now what do I do? How do I get myself back into position? I don't have a segment number to use because I forgot to turn that on. The segment number is not really going to help me at that point because I've drugged my machine out of position. And so, you know, it's even if I had the segment number, I may be able to get it back to that point, but I may not. And I've stopped my machine. Now I'm panicking. What do I do? How do I get myself back into position? One of the things that I do in a scenario like this is I try to, if at all possible, reposition my pattern based on one of the beginning start points, okay? In a pantograph, those are always pretty easy to spot because it's exactly where you started a pass. All right, so let's pretend that we've done that. We've gotten ourselves out of position. Okay, so we've tied off whatever we needed to do. We've rewound the bobbin. And now before we get stitching again, we need to get ourselves repositioned. So what I do is I grab my handlebars. I'm going to come over here, and let's say that I can see that the start point in either in my fabric or out into my batting, I can see where I started that row. So I'm going to put my machine right into position on top of that. Okay, I'm going to check where my start circle is. Okay, my start circle is at the beginning of a row, which is helpful. If it's not, I'm going to go to Quilt, New Start Point, and I'm going to jump it back to the beginning of a complete row. Okay, so we know that we can hit our jump arrows over here and we can jump ourselves back to the beginning of a start point. Okay, we've done that. Now we're going to go into Design, Reposition. We're going to reposition ourselves back at the beginning of a row. Not because we want to stitch that again. Clearly we don't. But now we should have ourselves pretty much repositioned. Now we all know because we're quilters and things might have shifted a little bit and maybe we didn't get our needle exactly right on top of that start point. Some of our lines might not match up properly. So before we start stitching again, what I do is I do a little bit of air stitching to make sure that I'm where I need to be. So it was somewhere, I forget exactly, but let's pretend it was somewhere over here in the middle of this pass that we lost our positioning. So I'm going to grab my machine and I'm going to come over there. I'm going to place myself over a portion of the stitching that I've already stitched. Okay, so on top of something I've already stitched. We're going to go under Quilt, New Start Point. We're going to do that Start Auto On, Start Auto Off. Now, we're pretty sure that we're in position, but we're not 100% sure. So let's go to Stitch. Let's turn off our stitch. That just means that my machine's going to move, but my needle will not. So I can follow my machine when I hit Proceed, and I can follow it as it moves over the lines that I've already stitched, and I can see if that is lining up properly. If it's not, I do an emergency stop. I go to my Design, Reposition, and here is where I start changing my nudge number to a very small number. Maybe I'm going to make it like a 0.03. And during my air stitch pattern, maybe I identified the fact that I need to just nudge myself up a little bit. So I'm going to nudge myself up just 3/100ths of an inch. I'm going to go back to Quilt and I'm going to stitch again with this unengaged. So I want to do some air stitching. I want to trace my pattern to see if I am in position. Okay, so that's how I do it a lot of times. A start point at the beginning of a pass is a very easy point to find. Now, you can find a point at any other place on the pattern that you've already stitched. A lot of people might do it that way. That's a completely fine way to do it. A lot of times a change in direction or a point is an easy spot in a pattern to go and make that your new start point, reposition it on that point, and then do a little bit of air stitching over a spot that you you've already stitched to see if you're lined up. I just find that automatically, almost 95, 98% of the time, I'm just going to pick the start point. I'm going to reposition myself on the start point, and then I'm going to do a little bit of air stitching over the top of what I've already stitched just to make sure that I'm aligned properly. Okay, so once I am aligned properly, then I'm going to fine tune that start point to exactly where I want to start. Okay, so maybe I want to go quilt new start, and maybe I want to back that start point up a little bit right on top of where I had left off, or where I had accidentally, drug my machine over my track. So you can fine tune, after you've done your air stitching, you can fine tune that start point exactly where you want to start. You can fine tune whether you want to pull up, which you probably are going to want to pull up, whether you want to tie off or not. And at this point, if you're smart, you're going to remember to turn on your status counter so that you always have that as a reference. Okay, everybody, I hope that's helpful. A little bit of the MK way of repositioning and restarting using our awesome Prostitcher systems. Thanks for joining me today. Happy quilting, everybody. Bye-bye.
All right, so there you have it. Really, it's pretty simple if you break it down. One of the things that I share with my students in my online classes is the fact that if you can understand start and stop points, it will really transform the way you quilt. All right, so use that status counter, find points in a pattern, reposition yourself, do a little air stitching to make sure you're aligned properly, and then it's happy quilting. All right, everybody, I hope it's helpful. Until next time, from MK to you, happy quilting. Bye-bye. Oh, it's my Sammy dog.
My heart sings.